Hello, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be making another robot from this sketch that I did at school. First, I grabbed this, I don't actually remember what it's from, and then here I grabbed the bottom of like this, plastic Easter eggs that you glue onto things. And then on top, the other blue thing is from like a gotcha surprise kind of thing. And here I'm like dry fitting them and testing them if they're going to fit. And then I glue them on. And then for the weird tube things, I still don't really know in the drawing what they were. For the weird tube things, I used, for like dog toilet paper rolls, it's kind of like how we have toilet paper and then there's like the rolls inside. So I used those to make those weird like tube things that I put. And I also then, to top them off, grabbed some wooden beads to put inside just to round them off and make them look finished. I then grabbed some EVA foam sheets, which I'm going to do some trimming on to make the edges like, I think it's called beveled edges, but I think I might be wrong. But to add some interest to the piece by adding like panels, like sheets of metal basically. I also grabbed a bottle lid and the inner tubing of a like tape, like a masking tape, or one type of tape, and I glued it on to be like a shoulder joint, and then grabbed, I can't remember what this was, but to make the other shoulder joint on the other side. Then grabbing some old vitamin D bottles, and for this one a bottle cap, and the other one I think I use a, what is it, like spice, a lid for that was on a spice container that I cut and then glued on to the other vitamin container to use as the forearms. I then grabbed more of the dog like toilet roll things and glued them onto both of the arms as a connection point that I'll later attach more things to attach to the arms. So this is the thing that I use to attach it to the arms. This is the one thing that I actually don't know what it is, but some sort of wooden tube, which then I also glued some wooden beads onto to make the connection points from the shoulder joints to the arms. And then here I'm grabbing corrugated card, which I'm going to attach to there to kind of be like a, well, like shoulder armor in a sense. I then glued the two pieces of the arm together, and I did this for both arms, and then glued it into the joints, or like attachment, I guess. The connection point, that's what I would call it. Then I glued it into the connection point on both arms, and then using another tube just to make it more sturdy and a little more interesting, glued in another tube, which I glued onto the other tube. I'm just gluing a lot of tubes together, if I'm being honest. Then I grabbed what used to be the tips of some old pens that don't work anymore, glued the arms into there, and that's then what I will glue onto the actual shoulder joints. And the funniest part is the way of doing this is just by using the very delicate technique of a copious amount of hot glue. I then started to make the hand by using some corrugated card on the back of the hand. And the main body of the hand itself is a wooden pencil sharpener that I removed the blades from, / got it without the blades. Then here I'm going to glue in beads as the base of where the fingers will go to be kind of like ball and socket joints in a way. Then here I grab more of the toilet roll stuff to glue onto the hand as the fingers. And I wanted the hand to be kind of in like a, I don't know how to call it, like clenched position, because the actual like pose is it's going to be walking on its hands. So I want it to kind of be closed up, kind of stomping around in a way. I then proceeded to glue on this weird wooden thing that I found. I think it's from a kit. I had like this dragon kit thing that I used. Then I found this thing. I don't know what this is, but I glued it onto the back, and then here I'm going to be gluing this like wire thing that I found that I twisted, and I'm going to be gluing it from inside of that thing onto the other shoulder. I glued on some more corrugated cards for like more paneling. And then this was a kyber crystal from a lightsaber from a really long time ago that I glued on. And then this was a lid to a thing that contained like lead, like for pencils. And then this was a tip of a pen that I connected, like a felt tip or something. And then this is another tip of a pen, which is, or it might have been actually the back where you kind of do the clicky thing that I glued into there just to make it look, I don't know, less empty in a sense. And here I grab the top of a like, what are they called? Ballpoint? Yeah, ballpoint pens. There's like a brand, I can't remember. And then I grabbed another toilet roll, glued it in there, and then grabbed a slightly thicker one to glue it on there. Kind of look like an exhaust pipe in a way. I then grabbed these old little game pieces that I glued on to the shoulder to kind of look like spiky like bits that, well, spike out to make them look a little more threatening in a way. I then glued on this piece from a fake Lego set. Don't worry, not real Lego, fake. And then I grabbed another one of the plastic eggs, and I glued both of these sides onto the vitamin bottle to give it more shape, just so it's not exactly like the other hand, and also, you know, not as flat, just gives it more of an interesting shape. I then grabbed some more EVA foam sheets to apply to certain areas on this arm to give, you know, more paneling, and then I'm going to then add some more stuff to this one panel in a sec. Before that, I glue on this other EVA panel to the like palm of the hand to hide the other bits of like the I don't know what to call it, where the old sharpener things used to be. Then I glued on the hand, and then this is, I don't even know what that's from, but I glued it on just to give it more shape, which then here I glue more wooden beads onto, and then add more finger bits to make a full curled finger. And earlier, that thing that I showed you, that disc, is going to be the base for the miniature, or it's not really that miniature. Then here are these like cannon bits from an old like army set of figures that I have. That I have a few pieces that I glue on to also give this arm like more of a unique thing. I then grabbed this bit that I think was like part of a zipper, which then I glued on over this, just, I don't know, kind of looked like a grate in a way, but I guess not really. And then this is where I start to work on the other hand, which is where I grabbed another vitamin bottle bit, or vitamin spice bottle bit, and then I actually don't remember what I glued in there, but just to make it easier to glue on an EVA foam sheet, just to cover it up and make it look better. I then glued on some more beads as I start to work on this hand, as I'm going to make it kind of like actually grabbing the floor and like palm up stretch. I grabbed some old toy sword handles and like katana handles to use as the main bit of the finger, and I use this on all 3 of the fingers. Then I glued on square joints this time, which doesn't really make much sense when you think about it, but we don't need to. But yeah, I glued on these like square-ish beads onto the end of the fingers to be joints, and we will later add the ends of the fingers. I then grabbed the other side of that like gacha prize thing and then glued it onto the front as like kind of the base of the head, and then grabbed some corrugated card to attach to the top, mainly because I thought it looked cool, and also kind of blended it in a little more with the actual model and looked less, I don't know, like sticky outy. And then here I cut some more EVA foam sheets, which I glued to all parts of the body, like under the shoulder or on the head. Well, not the actual head, I guess, technically, but like the neck. Technically the neck. Then here's where I start to actually glue on the real head. I've had this piece for a while, never really had a use for it, but then found one. Still don't know what it's from. And then these are also from that same wooden dragon kit, which I got to use as the eyes. And then I also grabbed a really small bead and just pushed it in to the other one because I thought it looked cool. So yeah. Here I was kind of testing out the position I wanted, and then I started to glue on both the arms. And then to incorporate the arms a little more so they don't, just stick out, I grabbed some EVA foam sheets, and then added little more EVA like rectangles, just add a little more detail and interest to that area. And then I did this to both arms. On the front area that's showing, I got glued on these little beads. I don't actually know what technically the, like scientific purpose or like from an engineering standpoint purpose of those would be, but whatever. And then here I glued on the ends of the fingers and glued on the hand to the forearm of the other arm. And again, I used the little toilet roll things for the end of the fingers, and then I glued him onto the base, gluing on one hand and then gluing on the other. And then here, this is what I was really excited about. So recently I got a, what would you call it, like miniature basing kit, which comes with like glue and then different basing things, and I was excited to use it. So I used these rocks to give the ground a little more interest, and then I glued in all these like foam rocks and more foam rocks onto the base of the model. Then I primed it, and sometimes I may describe more of the painting process, but I'm about to tell the story. But as you can see, a lot of the layers that I do on this model, I use sponge because it just gives it, I don't know how to describe it, like more rustic kind of looking paint job, not completely clean. Oh yeah, and I broke the model into pieces by accident, but I ended up using it to my advantage and just painting the parts separately, and then I glued them on later. The old myth goes a little something like this. Its large movements echo through the forest, causing the trees to quake and shake, stirring the birds. Its piercing yellow eyes gleam through the forest, waking every creature. Its hands dragging through the mud, leaving a trail none dare to follow. Vines and moss protruding off every surface. But the truth is, there is no creature. But what lies in that forest is much worse. It's what we folks call the Moss Walker. It's a large robot abandoned in the toxic jungle. The robot should no longer have any way of moving, seeing that its core processor was taken out to sell for parts. But the vegetation in that jungle is special. It allowed it to move again. The moss and vines and all sorts of plants worked its way into the bot, controlling it from the inside, corrupting its memory chip, influencing the robot to spread its seeds outside of the jungle. Obviously, this is not good, as the vegetation in the jungle is highly toxic. If it spreads any further, it could do serious damage. But every attempt to stop the robot has led to whoever tried to stop it going missing without a trace. The confusing part is you think the robot would, brutally murder them. But there's been no evidence found of anything to support this theory. Many folks believe the robot has an accomplice helping it to cover up the deaths. But no one knows, and if I'm being honest, I believe it, as it is the only explanation for the disappearances. But the true question everyone should be asking is if the robot has an accomplice, how is that person not dying to the toxic nature of the robot, and more importantly, how did they befriend the robot? And that was the story of the Moss Walker. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'm actually going to start describing what I'm doing with painting. So here I've been painting all these different bits black just to separate it from the rest of the build. Kind of painting where I believe more of the mechanical parts will be, in a sense. Obviously, yes, technically it's a robot, so everything is mechanical, but maybe parts that move or joints, or it just looks good to have it black. Then I was looking at the model and I was like, I think it might be a little too blue. So I got a green and started coloring different panels and different parts of the robot green. Again, just to separate all the blue, making it have a little more interest. I then grabbed a lighter green to kind of do some more edge highlighting, I guess, for the model, making, adding the lighter adding the lighter green made the model kind of because when I added the green, it looked very matte, especially compared to the metallics I used on the rest of the body. So adding this lighter green really made it look nicer, I guess. And then I looked at the model and I was still like, I think it's missing another color. So I grabbed a brown and started to apply it to different areas, doing basically the same thing that I did with the green. This is where I also used a lighter brown to basically, again, do the same that I did as the green, and edge highlight all the brown areas just to give it a little more interest and make it less, matte looking. Then I started to paint in the base. So I used, I don't exactly remember which color, but I used this pale, like yellow kind of, just to add detail. And then I also painted white in the eyes. And then here I decided I wanted to add rust to the model, because again I looked at it and went, this looks too plain and boring, because you know, just the metallics made it look very like cheap in a way, which I guess technically it is, because I used garbage to make it. But yeah, so I added rust to all the different pieces of the model using the sponge to just kind of give a random technique, and I also sponged another color onto the base, and then I used a yellow to give interest to the eyes, and then I grabbed a deeper orange for the rust and applied it to all of the model bits, like the hands, the arms, the hand on the base. And again, I will glue all these pieces back together. Honestly, I think it was more of a blessing that the piece of armor that the model kind of fell apart. And then here I grabbed glue from the same basing like kit, and then grabbed these. They had these like vine things, or bushes I guess, which is what I'm gluing on now, because again it's called the Moss Walker, so it had like moss and vines and stuff. So I glue on all this, and then there's also, it came with this like grass stuff, well grass, it's meant to be grass, which I sprinkled onto all these glue bits to make it look like moss. I then grabbed these grass tufts, which I put on the base to look more well finished, and then I painted the base black, the like sides, and then I think it's done. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe and leave a comment down below.